She stepped through the doors of the military store in an old, worn army jacket with tattered sleeves and faded patches. Some young officers snickered behind her, whispering it looked like something from a second-hand shop. She didn't react. She simply kept looking at the shelves, quietly picking what she needed while they continued their jokes. They had no idea her silence held the weight of secret missions no one was permitted to discuss. Welcome to the Human Stories. What part of the world are you watching from right now? If you love stories about hidden courage and surprising moments when truth comes out, think about subscribing to become part of our group. Morning light spread across Fort Braxton like a military drill, sunshine pouring over the grounds in neat lines. The base woke up to the sound of boots hitting pavement, engines starting, and faraway voices calling out commands from early exercise routines. American flags flapped in the wind, climbing up poles throughout the installation as a new day started. Miranda Reeves moved through this carefully timed routine like a shadow, both inside and outside the military world surrounding her. At 55, she held herself with the straight-back stance that had been taught to her years before, though her right leg dragged just a little with each step, a quiet reminder of prices she'd paid long ago. Her gray hair was tied back in a simple bun, her face showing no emotion as she walked toward the base store. The automatic doors opened with a mechanical whoosh. Miranda touched the collar of her faded olive-green army jacket, a piece from another time. The sleeves were fraying at the ends, the material thin at the elbows, and the color had shifted from olive to something more like tan in spots. She wore it not because she had to, but from routine and personal memory. The morning had been cool, and the jacket was what she'd grabbed first. Inside, the store buzzed with morning activity. Young families pushed shopping carts down rows, retired veterans gathered by the coffee area, and soldiers in uniform grabbed breakfast items and energy drinks before heading to work. Miranda picked up a red basket and walked carefully through the store, checking a neatly folded paper from her pocket. She stopped at the canned food section, looking at prices with focused attention. Her fingers, marked by a surgery scar across her right wrist, moved over the labels of soup cans, figuring out the best deal. Money was harder to come by these days. The VA benefits that should have supported her had gotten stuck in red tape about service records that officially didn't exist. Two young lieutenants in crisp uniforms turned the corner into her row, their talk breaking through her focus. "Did you hear about the new equipment for field training?" asked the taller one, his lieutenant bars shining under the bright lights. "Not yet, but Miller says it's the same shortage as before," his friend replied, then stopped when he saw Miranda. His eyes moved to her jacket and the edge of his mouth twitched. "Speaking of shortages," he said quietly, just loud enough to hear. Miranda kept looking at soup cans, her face unchanged, though her shoulders tightened slightly. "Must have raided her grandfather's closet," the taller lieutenant said with a smirk. "That thing looks like it survived World War II. "More like Vietnam," the other replied. "Probably got it at the thrift shop on sale day." Miranda picked 2 cans of soup and put them in her basket, then walked toward the pasta section. The lieutenants followed, their morning tasks apparently forgotten for this new entertainment. As she reached for a box of spaghetti on a high shelf, her jacket sleeve pulled up, showing more of the surgery scar on her wrist. The movement also made her wince, her right shoulder complaining about the stretch. The physical therapist had told her that full movement might never come back, but Miranda had learned to work around problems long ago. "Think that's from real service?" the shorter lieutenant whispered, not quite softly enough. "Or just pretending to look the part? Hard to say these days. Remember that guy last month claiming special forces when he couldn't even name the training process?" Miranda's hand gripped the pasta box, her knuckles turning white briefly before she placed it in her basket. She reached into her jacket's inner pocket for her shopping list, and as she did, an old photograph slipped partly into view before being tucked away again. Only Miranda knew it showed 5 soldiers in desert uniforms, faces partly hidden by shadows and tactical equipment, standing beside a helicopter with markings that had been purposely blurred before the photo was printed. She moved through the store, adding things to her basket while the lieutenants kept following, their comments growing slowly bolder as they noticed her continued silence. When she stopped at the dairy case, a small group of enlisted people came in, laughing together. One of the specialists saw the lieutenants and gave a quick salute. "Morning, sirs." "At ease," the taller lieutenant said with a wave. "Early shopping trip." "Yes, sir. Brigade coffee station needed supplies." The lieutenant nodded toward Miranda. "What do you think of that old-school fashion choice?" The specialist looked at Miranda's jacket, taking in the faded material and worn edges. He grinned, clearly sensing where his superior wanted this to go. Very old style, sir, almost looks real. Almost being the important word, the lieutenant said loud enough now that other shoppers looked their way. Miranda shut the dairy case door, a carton of eggs now in her basket. She turned toward the checkout lines, limping slightly as she changed direction. Long periods standing always made the old injury worse, though she'd learned to hide the weakness when needed. Classic fake veteran move, the shorter lieutenant said, no longer trying to keep his voice down. Bet she's going to the VA next to try for benefits. Miranda's next stop was indeed the VA office on the other side of the base, though not for the reasons they guessed. Her quarterly appeal was scheduled for 11 o'clock. Another try to get her service records partly unsealed so her medical claims could be handled. 3 earlier attempts had ended with apologetic rejections from administrators who couldn't acknowledge operations that officially never took place. As she walked to the checkout, the cashier, a retired master sergeant judging by the veteran's hat he wore, noticed her jacket. His eyes stayed for a moment on the faded spot above the left breast pocket where a unit patch had once been clearly seen. Now only the ghost of stitching remained, the embroidery worn away by years until only those who knew precisely what to seek might spot it. The cashier said nothing, though, simply scanning her items with practiced skill. Miranda paid with cash, counting out bills carefully from a thin wallet. "Have a good day, ma'am," the cashier said as he gave her the receipt. "You too," Miranda replied, her voice slightly rough from not being used. They were the first words she'd spoken out loud all morning. With her items bagged, Miranda headed toward customer service. The quarterly VA appeal needed her to confirm her address on base, a formality that never seemed to stick permanently in their system. Behind her, she could hear the lieutenants had finished their own shopping and were now in line a few registers over. The customer service line moved slowly. Miranda stood patiently, weight on her left leg to reduce pressure on her right. Her mind wandered as she waited, pulled back 22 years to another desert morning, the air thick with sand and the smell of aircraft fuel. "Captain Reeves, our window for pickup is closing." The voice of her team leader reached her across the years. "We either leave now or we don't leave at all." The memory faded as the customer service worker called next. Miranda stepped forward to the counter where a young woman with a name tag saying Alicia smiled professionally. "How can I help you today?" Alicia asked. "I need to confirm my current address for base records," Miranda said, sliding her ID toward the clerk. "Of course," Alicia said, typing the information into her computer. "Are you active duty or a family member?" "Veteran," Miranda answered. "I'll need to see your veteran ID card or discharge papers, please." Miranda knew this would happen just as it happened every 3 months. "My service records are under special security classification. I have a letter from the Department of Defense Records office." She pulled out a folder with several official-looking documents. Alicia looked unsure, clearly not trained for this situation. "I'm sorry, but we need standard paperwork. Let me get my supervisor." Behind her, Miranda could hear the lieutenants had finished checking out and were now standing nearby, watching the conversation with obvious interest. "Some people will claim anything for a 10% discount," the taller one said, just loud enough for those around to hear. Several people laughed, including one of the customer service workers at the next counter. The supervisor came over, a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense manner. She looked at Miranda's paperwork with a frown. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but these documents don't meet our requirements for veteran status confirmation. We need standard paperwork." "These are the only documents I'm allowed to carry," Miranda explained, her voice staying calm despite the familiar frustration building behind her composed exterior. "Then I can't update your information in our system," the supervisor said apologetically. "You'll need to contact the VA directly." "That's why I'm here," Miranda said. "The VA sent me to confirm my address with base records before my meeting." The circular process was one she'd walked many times before. Her work with Spectre Group stayed classified at a level that prevented normal paperwork, yet the injuries she'd received required ongoing medical treatment. Each rejection added another layer of frustration to a system that seemed built to make her quit. Behind her, the lieutenants had attracted a small crowd with their running commentary. "Classic situation," the shorter one was telling an interested specialist. "Wear something that looks military enough to pass a quick look, make up some tale about classified operations so no one can check anything. People who do that should face charges," the specialist agreed, throwing a judgmental look toward Miranda. The supervisor handed back Miranda's folder. "I'm sorry, I can't help you. You might try the main administration building instead." Miranda accepted the folder, tucking it into her jacket's inner pocket. As she did, the edge of a challenge coin briefly showed. Not the mass-produced kind sold in base gift shops, but a rare custom design given only to members of units whose existence stayed classified. "Thank you for your time," Miranda said quietly. She collected her groceries and turned to go, finding herself facing the small crowd that had formed. The looks ranged from outright mockery from the lieutenants to uncomfortable shame from those who sensed they might be seeing something they didn't fully grasp. Miranda straightened her shoulders, the built-in military posture showing itself automatically. She walked toward the exit, keeping her dignity despite the whispers that trailed her. The automatic doors opened ahead, showing the bright morning sunshine beyond. The automatic doors opened, and Miranda came face to face with another uniform, this one decorated with 4 stars. General Marcus Harris walked into the store with 2 aides, his attention on a document in his hands. He was a tall man with short silver hair and the presence of someone who'd spent a lifetime in leadership. "I want those deployment numbers recalculated by this afternoon," he was telling the aide on his right. "The committee needs real projections, not wishful thinking." "Yes, sir," the aide replied, making a note on his tablet. Miranda automatically moved to the side to let them pass, pulling her grocery bags closer to her body, her eyes down in the natural respect civilians often show around high-ranking officers. She had nearly cleared their path when General Harris looked up from his document, his eyes passing over her in the routine check of a security-minded officer. Then he froze. His body went stiff, the document in his hand forgotten as his gaze locked onto the nearly invisible patch above Miranda's heart. It was nothing more than a shadow on the fabric now, the embroidery worn away until only the faintest outline remained, a ghost of stitches that had once formed a symbol known to very few. The general's aides took 2 more steps before realizing their commanding officer had stopped. They turned, confused looks changing to worry as they watched the general's reaction. The store's background noise seemed to quiet as General Harris handed his document to the nearest aide without taking his eyes off Miranda. Then, with precision that came from decades of service, he straightened to attention and gave a perfect formal salute. Miranda froze, her grocery bag suddenly heavy in her hands. The salute in civilian areas was against rules. The recognition it showed was unheard of. The moment stretched, the general's salute steady. Around them, conversation stopped as military people noticed the remarkable scene playing out. The lieutenants who had been mocking Miranda moments before went silent, their looks shifting from amusement to confusion. With practiced muscle memory that went beyond the years, Miranda carefully moved her grocery bags to her left hand and returned the salute with perfect military precision, her movements changing from the careful motions of a civilian to the sharp certainty of a soldier. "Captain Reeves," General Harris said, his voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "Spectre Group, Tyran 03. It was both a statement and a question, a recognition and a check. 22 years collapsed between them, pressing time until that night in the Iranian desert felt as recent as yesterday. "Yes, sir," Miranda confirmed, her voice stronger now. The general lowered his salute, and Miranda did the same. The store had gone completely quiet, all attention on the unexpected exchange between a 4-star general and a woman in a worn military jacket. "At ease, Captain," the general said, though Miranda held no official rank anymore. "Thank you, sir," she replied, decades of military training guiding her response. General Harris dismissed his aides with a brief gesture. "Wait for me outside." His tone made it clear this wasn't a request to be questioned. The aides exchanged looks but quickly headed for the exit, leaving the general alone with Miranda amid the growing crowd of watchers. "It was your unit that got us out," the general said, his voice quieter now but still clear enough for those nearby to hear. 3 helicopters down, enemies on all sides. Your team created the escape path that saved 32 of us, including myself. Miranda nodded once, the memories she usually kept carefully locked away now rising to the surface. The night operation, the sandstorm that had grounded 3 rescue helicopters, the diplomatic team and their military guards trapped as Iranian Revolutionary Guard units closed in, the impossible choices made by her 6-person team to create an escape route. "That symbol," the general continued, gesturing to the faded area on her jacket, "hasn't been allowed to be worn since the unit was shut down. Official records list the rescue as equipment problem recovery successful. The crowd began to understand they were seeing something remarkable, a classified operation being acknowledged in public for perhaps the first time. The lieutenants who had been mocking Miranda stood frozen, their faces losing color as the meaning of their earlier behavior became clear. "How many of you made it home from that operation, Captain?" the general asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. "3 of us, sir," Miranda said softly. "I'm the last one now." General Harris took in this information with a slight tightening around his eyes, the only visible sign of feeling. "Would you join me for coffee, Captain?" He gestured toward the small cafe area in the corner of the store. "Of course, sir," Miranda replied. As they moved toward the cafe, the crowd parted silently, respect and curiosity mixing in the wake of the revelation. The lieutenants stood rooted to the spot, shame evident in their rigid postures. The general and Miranda settled at a small table in the corner, away from most of the watchers. A young airman working at the cafe counter rushed over to take their order, clearly nervous about the general's presence. "Just coffee, black," the general said. "The same," Miranda added. When the airman left, General Harris leaned forward. "I've often wondered what happened to your team after the debriefing. Everything went into classified files so deep even I couldn't access them anymore." "That was by design, sir," Miranda said. "Spectre Group worked under triple-blind rules. Mission details, team makeup, even our existence was compartmentalized." "For good reason," the general acknowledged. "That operation prevented a diplomatic disaster that could have led to open war." The airmen returned with their coffees, setting them down with nervous care before leaving. The general waited until they were alone again before continuing. "What brings you to Fort Braxton, Captain? Last information placed you retired in Colorado." "Medical appeal, sir," Miranda answered, her professional manner hiding the frustration of countless rejected claims. "I've been trying to get the VA to recognize injuries received during operations without being able to mention the operations themselves." "The catch-22 of the highest order," the general concluded, understanding immediately. "Yes, sir. My right leg and shoulder were damaged during the Tyran rescue. The medical records exist, but they're classified at a level the VA workers can't access." General Harris's expression hardened. "That ends today." He pulled out his phone and dialed with quick, decisive movements. "This is General Harris. I need immediate action on a personnel matter." He paused, listening. "Yes, that level of clearance. My authorization code is Sierra 9 Delta 40 Tango. Another pause as he listened to the response. "I need everything we have on Spectre Group declassified immediately, specifically relating to personnel injuries received during the Tyran Operation 2003. Priority order." He listened once more. "Yes, I understand the rules. Override them. This is a direct command." He ended the call and returned the phone to his pocket, his gaze meeting Miranda's. "Red tape moves slowly, especially when it comes to declassification. But my office will speed up everything they can. Your service will not continue to go unrecognized, Captain." "Thank you, sir," Miranda said, her composure held despite the surge of emotion his words triggered. After years of fighting the system alone, the simple act of recognition felt almost overwhelming. Their conversation was interrupted as the 2 lieutenants approached the table, their earlier confidence replaced by clear discomfort. They stopped at a respectful distance, coming to attention before the general. "Sir, request permission to speak," the taller lieutenant said, his voice tightly controlled. General Harris glanced at Miranda, a silent question in his eyes. She gave a small nod. "Granted," the general said. The lieutenant turned to Miranda. "Ma'am, I wish to apologize for my extremely inappropriate and disrespectful behavior. There is no excuse for how we spoke to you or about you." His companion joined in. "We acted shamefully, ma'am. We failed to uphold the values of the officer corps and the respect owed to all service members, especially those who served in classified operations." Miranda studied them for a moment, seeing beyond their current embarrassment to the officers they might become. "You couldn't have known," she said finally. "That was the point of units like mine. We worked in shadows so others could work in the light." "That doesn't excuse our behavior," the taller lieutenant said. "We judged based on appearances, not understanding what we were seeing." "A lesson worth learning early in your careers," General Harris observed, his tone making it clear that while the apology was accepted, the incident would not be forgotten. "Yes, sir," both lieutenants replied together. "Return to your duties," the general dismissed them. As the lieutenants left, word of what had happened had clearly spread through the store. Veterans began approaching the table, not interrupting, but offering quiet nods of respect or simple acknowledgments as they passed. The atmosphere had transformed from one of mockery to deep respect. "Your jacket," General Harris said, returning to their conversation. "It's not standard issue for Spectre Group. I remember your team wore modified multicam patterns." Miranda ran her fingers over the worn fabric, a gesture filled with memory. "It belonged to Major Callahan, our unit commander. He didn't make it back from Tyran. I've kept it all these years." The general nodded, understanding the weight of carrying a fallen friend's memory. "Daniel Callahan was one of the finest officers I ever met. I was never officially told how he died." "Covering our rescue, sir. He held the defense line alone so the rest of us could get the diplomatic team to the backup pickup point. His last order was for us not to come back for him." "And you've carried his jacket ever since," the general observed. "It was all that made it back besides his dog tags," Miranda confirmed. "Those went to his family with the official story about a training accident. The jacket came to me since I was his second in command." General Harris studied her with new understanding. "And the patch? I'm surprised you keep it visible at all given the classification level." "Time did that for me, sir," Miranda said with the hint of a smile. "It's worn away enough that only someone who knew exactly what to look for would recognize it. I've kept the original patch in storage all these years." "Along with the memories," the general added. "Some things you don't need physical reminders to remember, sir." Around them, the store had returned to its normal operations, though glances continued to be cast their way. The supervisor from customer service approached carefully, her earlier rule-focused certainty replaced by nervous respect. "General Harris," she began, "I want to apologize for any trouble earlier. If there's anything customer service can do to help Captain Reeves, we would be honored to assist." "Thank you," the general replied. "I believe we'll be solving Captain Reeves's paperwork issues at a higher level today." "Of course, sir," the supervisor said, leaving quickly. Miranda watched the interaction with quiet amusement. Amazing how quickly things change when a general takes interest. "Rank has its advantages," General Harris acknowledged, "though in this case it's simply correcting a long-standing mistake." He checked his watch. "I have a meeting in 20 minutes I can't reschedule, but I want you to come to my office afterward. We have much to discuss about making sure you receive the benefits and recognition you're entitled to." "That's not necessary, sir," Miranda began. "It absolutely is," the general countered firmly. "What your team did saved lives, including mine. The classification was necessary, but allowing that same classification to deny you proper medical care and benefits is wrong. Some forms of gratitude shouldn't remain classified." 3 months later, Miranda Reeves walked through the same automatic doors of the Fort Braxton store. The morning routine around her stayed unchanged. Recruits jogging in groups, flags rising on poles across the base, personnel hurrying to their workstations. But for Miranda, everything was different. She still wore the same faded olive green jacket, but it had been carefully cleaned and preserved. The patch above her heart, once worn to near invisibility, had been restored. The symbol of Spectre Group now clearly visible, though understated. Below it gleamed a small pin representing the Presidential Unit citation, finally given after 20 years of official silence. Miranda's walk was stronger now, her limp less noticeable. The medical treatments she had been fighting to receive for years had finally begun, courtesy of rushed VA approvals that appeared mysteriously in the system 2 days after her meeting with General Harris. Physical therapy was slowly bringing back function to her damaged leg and shoulder, though the therapists warned that some limitations would always remain. The store was busy with the morning rush, but today, Miranda noticed the difference in how people looked at her. The mocking glances were gone, replaced by nods of recognition or respect. Not everyone knew her story. Most of the details remained classified, but word had spread through the base community that the woman in the faded jacket was someone who had earned her place in military history, even if that history remained partly hidden. The clerk at the customer service counter recognized her right away. "Good morning, Captain Reeves," she called with a respectful nod. Good morning, Alicia, Miranda replied, having learned the young woman's name during her now much smoother interactions with base services. As Miranda picked a shopping basket and began moving through the rows, she noticed one of the lieutenants from that day 3 months ago. He was alone this time, looking at canned goods with the serious focus of someone still learning to manage a household budget on military pay. When he looked up and saw Miranda, his expression moved quickly through recognition, embarrassment, and determination. He approached her with the direct manner officers were taught to use when addressing difficult situations. "Captain Reeves," he said, coming to a respectful stop several feet away. "Lieutenant Harmon, I wanted to tell you that your case study is now part of our professional development training." Miranda looked at him with mild surprise. "Is that so?" "Yes, ma'am. General Harris personally added it to the officer training program. They don't share all the classified details, of course, but they use your story to teach us about making assumptions and respecting those who served before us, especially in ways that aren't obvious from badges or uniform." Miranda nodded, accepting this information with the same quiet dignity she brought to everything. "Good lessons for any officer." "They are, ma'am." The lieutenant hesitated, then added, "I've taken those lessons particularly to heart given my personal failure in that area." "We all learn from experience, Lieutenant," Miranda said, her tone softening slightly. "Sometimes the most valuable lessons come from our mistakes." "Yes, ma'am," he straightened his shoulders. "Thank you for your service, Captain, both then and now." As the lieutenant moved away, Miranda continued her shopping with a thoughtful expression. The exchange had been one of many such encounters over the past months, as word of her service had spread through official and unofficial channels. General Harris had been true to his word, starting the process of limited declassification for the Spectre Group records related to medical treatment and benefits. While most operational details remained highly classified, enough had been made available to validate the service of the surviving team members. For Miranda, the changes went beyond improved medical care and proper benefits. After years of operating in shadows and then living in the limbo of unacknowledged service, the simple act of recognition had shifted something fundamental in her relationship with her past. She completed her shopping efficiently, selecting items with the same careful attention to value, though financial concerns were less pressing now that her disability benefits had been approved. As she walked to the checkout, she noticed the same cashier who had recognized her jacket that first day. "Morning, Captain," he said with a nod to her patch. "Good to see that getting the respect it deserves now." "Morning, Master Sergeant," she replied, having learned his name and former rank during previous visits. "Things have improved considerably." "About time," he said as he scanned her items. "Some of us suspected what that faded patch might be, but you don't ask about those things unless someone wants to tell you." "Appreciate the discretion," Miranda said. "It's been built in for so long it's still strange having it acknowledged." "I imagine so." He finished bagging her groceries. "My nephew's at the academy now, says they've started teaching about specialized units in proper conduct. Your unit specifically got mentioned, though not by name or mission details." "Progress," Miranda agreed, paying for her groceries. As she turned from the checkout, a young female officer approached her, moving with the slightly nervous energy of someone about to speak to a superior they greatly respect. She was perhaps 25, with lieutenant bars gleaming on her uniform and the focused intensity of the recently commissioned. "Excuse me," the young woman said. "Are you Captain Miranda Reeves from Spectre Group?" Miranda assessed the lieutenant with a quick glance, nodding the intelligence symbol on her uniform. "I am." The lieutenant came to attention, offering a crisp salute. "Lieutenant Sarah Mercer, ma'am, 103rd Military Intelligence Battalion." Miranda returned the salute with built-in precision. "At ease, Lieutenant. How can I help you?" "Ma'am, I've been studying your rescue techniques as part of advanced training. They've added the declassified portions of your Tyran operation into the updated field manual." The lieutenant's expression showed genuine admiration. "Your innovations in limited resource rescue under hostile conditions have become foundational training." For the first time in longer than she could remember, Miranda felt a rush of pride that had nothing to do with hidden accomplishments. "I'm glad the lessons we learned the hard way are being passed along." "They are, ma'am," Lieutenant Mercer assured her. In fact, I'm part of a training development team working on updated rules based on your team's methods. She hesitated briefly. I was wondering if you might consider speaking to my platoon sometime. Having insight directly from you would be invaluable. 20 years of automatic silence fought briefly with the new reality of selective disclosure. Miranda studied the young officer, seeing in her the same determination and intelligence that had marked the members of her own team so long ago. I'd be happy to speak with your platoon, Miranda said, surprising herself with how easily the words came. Within classification limitations, of course. Lieutenant Mercer's face lit up. That would be incredible, ma'am. The team would benefit tremendously from your experience. They exchanged contact information, and as the lieutenant left with a final salute, Miranda found herself thinking about this unexpected turn in her life's path. After decades of shadows, she was stepping cautiously into the light, finding purpose in sharing what could be shared with the next generation. As Miranda left the store, grocery bags in hand, she passed a group of young soldiers who straightened naturally at the sight of her patch and citation. Their reactions were no longer based on assumptions about a worn jacket, but on recognition of what it represented. Outside, the morning sun had risen fully, casting sharp relief across the orderly landscape of Fort Braxton. Miranda paused for a moment, adjusting to the brightness. A figure approached from the direction of headquarters, and she recognized General Harris walking with another officer. The general noticed her and changed his path slightly to meet her. "Captain Reeves," he greeted her, "just the person I wanted to see." "General," Miranda acknowledged with a nod. "How can I help you, sir?" "I've been reviewing the progress on the declassification process," he said. "There's been a development I think you'll want to hear about." "Sir?" "We've located Specialist Rodriguez's family," the general said, referring to another member of Spectre Group who hadn't survived. "With the partial declassification, we can finally arrange proper recognition for his sacrifice. His daughter will receive his Silver Star next month." Miranda absorbed this news, thinking of the young communications specialist who had died making sure their rescue team maintained contact during the operation. His daughter must be in her 20s now. 26, the general confirmed. She grew up believing her father died in a training accident. Now she'll know he died a hero even if she can't know all the details. "That matters," Miranda said softly. "It matters a great deal." "We'd like you to be part of the ceremony," General Harris continued. "As the last surviving team member, your presence would mean a lot to his family." "Of course, sir, I'd be honored." The general nodded. "Excellent, my aide will send you the details." He gestured to the patch on her jacket. "I see you've restored the symbol." "Yes, sir. Seemed appropriate now that it's partly acknowledged." "It suits you, Captain," the general said. "Always did." He checked his watch. "I need to get to a briefing, but there's something else I wanted to mention. We're establishing a specialized training program for rescue operations under complex conditions. Your input would be invaluable in designing the curriculum." "Teaching was never my specialty, sir," Miranda said cautiously. "Experience is what we need, Captain. The kind that can't be found in manuals. Think about it." With a final nod, the general continued toward headquarters, leaving Miranda to consider this new possibility. As she walked toward her car, Miranda's thoughts drifted to the members of her team who hadn't lived to see this day. Major Callahan, whose jacket she wore. Specialist Rodriguez, whose family would finally learn part of the truth. Lieutenant Way and Sergeant Decker, who had made it home but died from injuries and illness in the years since. She had carried their memories alone for so long, the sole keeper of their shared history. Now, at least some of that history would be preserved, acknowledged, and learned from. Not everything. Some aspects of their operations would remain classified for decades to come, but enough that their service and sacrifices would no longer be completely hidden in blacked-out files in officially non-existent units. Miranda reached her car and carefully placed her groceries in the trunk. As she closed it, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window. The woman who looked back at her stood straighter than she had in years, the restored patch and new citation gleaming in the morning sun. For the first time in decades, Miranda Reeves smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. She was no longer invisible, no longer caught between worlds. The classified operations would always be part of her, but they no longer defined the entirety of her existence. She had stepped out of the shadows, not completely into the light. Some shadows would always remain, but into a middle ground where her service could be acknowledged, where the next generation could learn from what she and her team had accomplished and sacrificed. As Miranda drove away from the store, she began mentally preparing for her meeting with Lieutenant Mercer's platoon. There were lessons to be shared, wisdom to be passed along, a legacy to be honored. After 20 years of silence, she finally had something she could say out loud.